This is a kind of a precursor to a session I'll be teaching in June in Australia for Built. I almost said RTC. I almost got nailed there for the old thing. So this is one I'll be teaching in there, and it's just basically a list of tips that I've been coming up with. I don't actually have a handout or anything proper or a PowerPoint because I've been working on it, but I've gotten started, and as of right now, I have 11 pages of right clicks. So I've got 11 pages of right click tips, which is where I'm going to start, and then I'll just start jumping into some of the other tips that I have for things like that. So if anybody really wants to see this presentation fine-tuned, like I said, it will be in Australia. So if anybody wants to go to Australia in June 18th, 19th, and 20th, this will be one of the sessions I'll be teaching there. Anybody else going to Midwest U next month?
Scott Davis is raising his hand.
I get to go present.
I'm presenting.
Cool. So a few of us. I know myself will be there. Jason Pekovich will be there, who's on the call. So just another thing to go through. I'm not teaching this class there. I think Tobias said it earlier. I don't know who was in the room when he said it, but so this is going to be one for Bill to not, unfortunately, the inexpensive trip to Minneapolis. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. You guys feel free to interject at any point in time. If anybody sees anything that they wanted to get into or ask a question on, you'll have to yell pretty loud, obviously, for me to hear you, but feel free to interject at any point in time. I do not care. So I'm going to jump into at the beginning, and I'm just going to start off with a whole bunch of right-click stuff that I always do. And it's actually funny. I've been kind of talking with Autodesk sometimes on the beta stuff, and they are possibly debating getting into some more of the they keep having discussions on how to change the UI in Revit, et cetera. And one of the things they have talked about is right-click contextuals. And I sit there and laugh because 90% of what I show for contextuals doesn't actually ever, most people don't know about. So I'm laughing if they keep adding more stuff into it, it'll be a little bit different when we get into it. I just gotta open up my Word document just to kind of keep me somewhat on track again. Oops. So we're gonna jump in. I've got these kind of broken down into a whole bunch of different categories when I start looking at them. So I'm really just gonna start off with some of the 3D views. Often I get asked, and I know this isn't exactly the answer to the question, but how can I tell where my camera views are cut? Did anybody ever know that you can right click on any sort of 3D view in the project browser and you can go to show camera? So if you click show camera, it's actually going to show you where that 3D view is taken from. You can actually go to your default 3D view, whichever you want to look at. It can be perspective, or it can be isometric, or excuse me, orthogonal, orthographic. It doesn't matter, but it will start showing you that stuff. So any view you have, you can just hit your show camera button and it's going to pop up the camera and show you the display of where that camera is. You can tell if it's a perspective or orthographic view, because if it's an orthographic, you get a single line. And if it's actually a perspective, when you get into the show camera, you're gonna actually see the big triangular box. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to actually set this and like put some sort of documentation feature there, but it does help you know if you do have some sort of little like graphic symbol you're putting down to represent those views to kind of show what's going up. I also don't know when this got snuck in. I found this out just recently when trying to do this, that if you go to one that has a cut plane, or excuse me, a section box turned on, you now also get the option to say show section box. I don't know when this got snuck in. I did not see this originally, but you do have show section box. Tobias got muted. I can't hear anybody there. Somehow Tobias is muted.
I muted you because you were kind of going in and out. So if there are questions in the room, I'll just unmute.
Okay, cool. Just checking. I just saw that. I thought it got awfully quiet. I was wondering if I lost my connection, and I just saw you were muted. No worries.
Well, I also set the microphone to be all over the room, so maybe somebody in the back. Alyssa, can you say something and see if we can hear you?
Cool. That's great. Just let me know. Just buzz in. Okay. So this was new. This cut. So if I go to this 3D view and I have the section box turned on, one of the things in here, if the section box is turned on, you can right-click on any view with the section box and say show the section box, and it'll actually pull it up. Where this can be, really beneficial, obviously, is if you're in like a tiled view. Knows this one. If you're tiled and you're like, man, I want to adjust this section box, I want to get it right to the center line of that wall or whatever. Two ways you can do it. One way I've always done it is select the section box in one view and it will display in the other. But if you are in that view, you can right-click, say, show section box. So not a huge deal, but you can use it, grab it, adjust it from one view to go through to the other one. So that one was kind of new to me that I did not know about. So I thought that was kind of a cool tip that I literally discovered doing this one. So the other one that this got, I think this got tweeted a while ago by one of the Revit forum oops, not what I wanted. One of the Revit forum users, I'm gonna go make this big again. One of the Revit forum users got into this and everybody was complaining how there was no way in Revit to actually change the focal depth of your camera view. But if you open the steering wheel, you can right click on the steering wheel, but basically all right clicking on the steering wheel does is pull down this little drop down on the bottom corner of the steering wheel. But that little drop down actually will give you increase, decrease focal depth. And then you can actually change the focal depth without making it too fisheye or too perspective-y or whatever you want to look at. You can basically change the perspective. It's not going to give you like 35 millimeter or whatever you want to do, but it does allow you to change that focal depth as you're starting to go through.
Brian, just hold on for a minute because there are lots of people in the room just like losing their mind right now. That's so amazing.
Yeah, this one actually blew up on Twitter. It's about 3 years ago when somebody did the increase, decrease focal length. And it was like, oh my God, we've all been saying, no, that's not possible to do in Revit. And yet he's like, oh no, it's just you right click on the view cube. I'm like, damn it, a right click I hadn't found. So just again, view cube, either right click on it or hit the little drop down in the corner. And if you hit that, that just brings your settings. There's increase, decrease focal depth.
There's always the, oh, but why can't I say I want 35 millimeter, right?
Yeah, well,
very specific focal length. But, oh,
you know, you know the answer to that one, Scott. Revit ideas.
Right, revitideas.com, right.
So that's a real pain if you're doing a bunch of renderings and you want them all to have the same angle for your camera.
Exactly.
The only thing I've figured out is to just copy the cameras around. You get it the way you want it.
I was going to say, set it up in your view template. Yeah, template off of one of them.
And before you mute, I'll go back, Brian, real quickly. You had said earlier when you talked about right-clicking and showing the camera. At one point in time in Revit history, way back when, there was a project that got into beta where we tried to actually make an annotation that you could actually show the camera annotation and drag and drop it, put it on a sheet. It would say camera view sheet, whatever. And it broke something in work sets in beta. And basically, seemingly completely unrelated. I don't know if you remember this. You remember that project? I don't know exactly what happened, and it got scrapped out of beta and never came back again. It like was a major serious error. So it's not that we haven't tried. At some point, we tried to do it and it went away. So at one point, we tried to make that little camera symbol actual an annotation icon.
Yeah, it's actually funny for the Inkscape users. Inkscape actually used to have it, and they could actually live update. So as you walked around in Inkscape, you could see the camera moving around in your project.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still there because I haven't used it in a while, but that was actually.
I see you've got the perspective camera selected. Like you haven't done any neat interactions with it. Like you can't actually pull back the plane and stuff like that with it in the plan view.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so it is, yeah. So yeah, I didn't do that. You can show the camera and you can actually adjust where the camera is. You can adjust how far back it's looking, its rotation. I should probably tile these so you can see me doing it in plan and see it actually happening up there. Let me get rid of this one. So yeah, as I'm adjusting it in plan, this is pulling the depth back, so you're probably not going to see that. Let me pull the camera back. Oops, everything's gone. But you can see, you can start to play with that while in a plan view to kind of get what you're going. The big time where this always works for me is inevitably somebody places a camera and they've got things like furniture or some other category in Revit turned off, and they go to the camera going, the camera view is not showing anything. Well, yeah, you put it in the middle of a couch, a light or something. So being able to show the camera view in a plan to me is very beneficial because I've had multiple times people like, I can't see that. Well, yeah, because you're in the middle of something that's just turned off in your category. The other thing on that too is when you are in, does anybody use the view cube, right? Nobody, right? Because it's terrible.
Wait. No, that thing's called the nav wheel, and no, nobody uses it.
Navigation wheel, you're correct. So the navigation wheel, what's really cool about this that everybody should use is rewind. I can actually go back to anywhere this view was zoomed to since this project has been open. Works also in flat out 2D views. If I go to my 2D view, I can rewind to anywhere I've been, and I've been working on this project all afternoon. So for the last 4 hours, I can go back to any location where I had zoomed in and out of this file since the view's been open. So the navigation wheel, the rewind, is an awesome tool in any single view, especially in camera views when you're breaking it, because you're gonna be like, okay, I wanna like spin, and oh crap, that's not what I wanted. Can I go back? And like undo doesn't go back, but rewind does.
Look is also nice right there too.
Yeah, that's the other thing where I was going, is a lot of people don't know that if you actually, I'm gonna pull it over here, if you just hover over a tool, a lot of times it'll pop you up a tooltip. And most people don't know that as you look around, you can press shift to look at a certain face. But the other cool about it is once you hold the look up, if you notice in the middle of my screen, it says use the arrow keys. I can actually walk like a first-person shooter in Revit. So everybody's been saying, oh, I want Inkscape to do that. Granted, this is a teeny tiny file. I can even put myself in realistic and now use the steering wheel and look, and I can look around and I can walk. But if you're actually getting into trying to set up a camera view for the rendering, the steering wheel becomes huge. Being able to hit the look, oh, I kind of wanted to pan it up a little bit. The steering wheel is huge when you're in a camera view, not when you're in any other view, but I use this tool often in camera views. Like, oh, I just want to be up a little bit. You can move it up, you can move it down, you can change your look. So I think the steering wheel becomes big in camera views, but regardless, the rewind is huge. Nope, I lied. I want to go all the way back to where I was at the beginning.
Teaser, you guys are gonna be super excited about 2021.
We actually made the nav wheel not a clingy, annoying UI.
Something to do with realistic views. That's all.
So, and theoretically in 2020, there's going to be on the steering wheel, nope, actually in 2020, if you guys haven't noticed, they got rid of one of the tools and there's now a fly tool in 2020, which is going to allow you to start cruising through the model if you're in fly mode. So that was a new 2020 feature. If anybody noticed, the navigation bar looked different. Okay, so if you're actually not in a camera view and you are in like a perspective view, and an orthogonal view, I'm not really sure what this would be for. Let me go to zoom to fit. But if you right click on the steering wheel, you will see that, no, not the steering wheel. Sorry, not the view cube. If you right click on the navigation wheel, if you open up and right click on it, one of the other things you actually have is, where am I going to? Which one was I looking for? Sorry, if you just right click in the view, no navigation wheel, getting ahead of myself here. If you just right click in the view, you do actually have a little thing that says reset crop boundary to model. I really don't know why you would ever want to turn your crop region on and reset it to the model. But you can turn the crop region on and reset it to the model in a orthogonal view. Ironically, it's different in a perspective view. You can also just say reset the crop boundary to the screen. So if you had this 3D view on a sheet and you wanted to adjust it to the screen, you can do that as well. I really don't know why you would want to, but it is one of the tips that were out there. I had one client who used it, and I don't really remember why they used it that much. So if you are in a perspective view, go back to my little perspective view here, you do have right click, and you do have the same things to the model and the screen in a perspective view, but kind of maybe nice if you're thinking this is about where I want the view to be. So when I go ahead and you need to adjust that to put it onto a sheet or something, the reset boundary to model, I don't know if you ever would really use that tool, but again, those are some features in there that you do have. The one thing to me that I use often, and I'm going to go into this nice little displaced view here. So I've got this little displaced view set up for this, this project. And one thing that I use often is a lot of times I see people using like this lock tool to lock the orientation of the view. But if you do that, you can't then freely spin and do what you want to do in that view if it's locked. So for me, what I like to do is get it to a place where I want it to be, and then right click on the view cube and say save view. If this isn't your default or one of your views that are in brackets, it'll allow you to save this view. And what it does is it saves the orientation of that view. So the next time you open up the project, it'll come back default to that orientation. This is actually the same in Revit families too. So I do this all the time in my Revit families, so I can choose where that 3D perspective view or that 3D view is going to be, which is what it saves the thumbnails from. So I use the right click save view all the time. And then if I come out of this project and if I go like this later or whatever, next time I come back into the project, it'll default back to that. But I'm still able to spin the model and work, but I maybe want something default, especially in families, for the thumbnail preview to come up when I'm getting into there. The other thing that you can also do that I don't see people doing a lot of the times, and granted this is my teeny tiny little project here, but I don't see a lot of people doing is if you right click on a view cube, you have all these different orients, right? So one of the things you can do is orient to a direction. I don't know why you would ever do this because all that is the different places you can click on the view cube. So orient to direction, I would never right click and do because I can do the same thing by clicking on the view cube and getting to that northeast corner. But what is nice is if you want to go ahead and orient this to other views, you can orient it to floor plans, elevation sections, or 3D views. So if you've got like a wall section in your project, you can come down here and say, ooh, gee, I wanted to go orient this directly to the same as that section. And what it does is it rotates you around and it turns your section box on to get you to be in the exact same position as that section is. It's not live linked to that, but it is just a way to get you there to kind of set it up. And I have one client who they set up all their wall sections and then they duplicate a 3D view oriented to that wall section, and every single one of their wall sections has a 3D section like this placed next to it so they can see what's going on. These can be placed on sheets. They still look at the same scale, etc. So if you're going to put it next to an actual wall section, try to match your scales up, etc. And it works really, really well. I also, in most of my projects, a lot of times will duplicate and save all of these, and I'll actually save them to each level. So I'll come down here and be like, ooh, I want to have this first floor plan set up. So I basically have one set up to my floor plan level 1, floor plan level 2, floor plan level 3. So however many floors I have on a project, I set up a 3D view saved to it. And what it snaps to in a floor plan is your primary view range. So the view range, so the top as well as the bottom is what it's going to snap that section box to. And then it's going to look to the extent of your crop region to set the section box to. So the height's done by view range, the primary view range, and then the plan, the XY is set to whatever your crop region is. And I use those all of the time. I use them a little bit less now that we've got the selection box tool, but I still like to have some of these things preset up in my project as well.
I'm glad you brought up selection box. Can you show that? Or is that part of your?
Oh, that wasn't, but sure, I can. So the other thing that's great, and this is a tool, this was my favorite tool in 2000, and I think it was 17.2. But one thing that I love is you're like, man, I really want to go see what's going on. If you select an object or objects, there is the BX command or the selection box command. And if you hit that command, it's going to take you to your default 3D view. It's going to turn the section box on and associate it a given distance. I don't know what that given distance is from the extent of your thing. I believe it's 1 foot, but I'm not 100% positive on that. So basically I had that door selected. That door has a planned swing that comes out 3 feet. So it's 4 feet away from that. And this one swings in, so it gave me 1 foot away. And all it's doing is turning on your section box and then associating that section box to within the boundaries of the objects you have selected. There were a lot of add-ins that did that before, but it's just really nice to see that we've got that built inside of Revit right now. One of the things that I love that's set up too is if I go orient this to a floor plan, to do level 1, we've also had the capability for a while. You can do this in the properties. That's new, but you've been able to do it more so in a perspective view. So here's my level 1 view, right? And I've got this level 1 view set up. I'm going to just do it for a single building, so it's a little bit different here than the other file I have. And now I've got this all set up. I could actually just come up here and say I want to go to perspective. So I've now got a perspective floor plan. So I get questions a lot about, gee, can I get like a perspective floor plan done easily? Yeah, you can just orient yours to one of your floor plans, check the perspective box, and then boom, you get the perspective. Like I said, it's using the primary view range, so it's not doing this at 4 foot like a normal floor plan, but it's just going to go through and set this up and give you that perspective look. So another one of the great tools that I like having in there. There is another crazy way to actually rotate a floor plan to be perspective, but I'm not going to go into that. So you can actually still use color schemes and get all your rooms color schemed and stuff. It's kind of weird though, because it actually will section the walls at the cut range, but then the doors and stuff will be full 3D extent. So it's kind of really bizarre. Like all your doors and windows are sticking above the walls and it's kind of deceiving, but there is a way to actually do that as well. Another tool that I use often is if I'm in a section view. Everybody knows that you can select a section and you can hit the little flip control to flip the section here. But not everybody knows that if you have a section selected, you can right click and say flip section. So I can flip it without having to zoom out and try to find the thing. I'm constantly seeing people go like this and then go like this to try to find that section. And on large projects, that can actually take quite a bit of time. So you have the capability to just select the section and say flip that section. You also can do that while in a section. So if I'm in a section here and I select the section box, it doesn't actually have to be cropping the view. I just have to select that crop region. That's the same thing as selecting the section in a floor plan. So as long as I'm doing that, I can then right click and say flip section. So while I'm in a section, I can flip a section. And I use this tool often. It's like, oh crap, I needed to work on something here. Oh no, now I see something behind me. Just turn the crop region on if it's not. You don't even have to have it active. And then flip your section. Okay. Another thing that I've kind of lied to people in the past about, I've always tried to tell people that you can't select a section by grabbing the head, or an elevation by grabbing the head, or a level by grabbing the head. But if you hold the control key down, you can actually select the section. So sometimes I've had people with extremely, extremely short sections, and they have a very difficult time because somebody went like this and created a section like that. I'm like, man, I'm trying to select it, but it's really hard to select. If you hold the control key down, that will allow you to grab that section, level, whatever, without having to not be on the hyperlinked head. So that's a little tip you got in there as well. The other thing that's kind of fun to see and get into, and this is one that I use often, it depends on the size of the project, but if you right click on the screen, you can actually hit this find referring views. Nice thing about find referring views is it's going to show you every single view that this section is visible in. So it's like, oh yeah, this section can be seen in every single one of these different views. One of the things that starts coming to play on this too is it depends on how that section is cut. So if I take this section and I move it all the way heck down here, like to below the footing, and then I right click and say go to view, right click and say find referring views, that list just got shorter because it understands the 3D extents of this section, where it's being taken from and where it's not being taken from, to be able to display in those views. Okay, so some of the other right clicks that I use constantly is, I think everybody knows you can right click on a project on the project browser. I don't see a lot of people use the expand all and collapse all. These are really great features. I used to use a Windows tip just to drive people crazy, that you could actually hit the asterisk key, and if you hit the asterisk key on the keyboard, it would literally expand every single thing in your project browser. So this is a Windows-based expand. It expands everything. Kind of funny in the category you're selected. So I used to do this to people to be evil. Or you see somebody with Windows Explorer open, you can use the asterisk key and expand their entire C drive. Kind of fun to do to people. But you can do the right click now. We do have the expand all, collapse all, etc. But the one tip that I always like to tell people is when you right click and you're using the search, where you start that search is what it's going to start looking for. So if I'm right clicking up here and I type in the word door, it might start going through door details, door finishes, door tags. And it's like, man, I'm actually really looking for the door family. So if I'm going to be doing searches, I usually right click below annotation symbols and go up and do my search. Now when I do search for my doors, I'm not going to get all the legends that say door legend, the views that say door views, the sheets that say door sheets, etc. It's going to take me right down to, oh, gee, look, here's something that says doors on it. So where you right click becomes big for the searching inside of Revit. The other thing that I do often is I know that there might be a view that is placed on a sheet. So I'm going to be sitting here and I'm like, hey, I'm working my overall plan view. If you right click on a view, you can actually say open sheet. You can also open the view, which honest truth, I have no idea why you would hit open view. I've never understood that rather than double clicking, but you can. But the one nice thing is if it's on a sheet, you can hit open sheet and it will take you to the sheet and open that sheet. I wish natively we could actually grab a view, right click and say open view. Revit has a tool that will do that, but natively in Revit, we can't be in a sheet and tell it to go open the view for us. We can find the sheet over here, obviously, go through the sheets if you know where the sheet is in the browser organization, and obviously double click that view to open it. But I wish there was a way to just simply do that from a sheet. We just don't have that. Okay, so one of the tips that I talk a lot, and I don't know if everybody's using dependent views often. A lot of times what I will do is I will go in and I will set up a dependent view template, right? So I should have renamed this one. I usually come in here and have this one, you know, my main level parent template. And the reason why I have this is in this view, I've went in and I've set up all my scope boxes, not a big deal, but I've created all my dependent views, my sector A, B, C, D. I've also added all of the view references. So this is my view reference telling me this is my sector A, this is my view reference telling me this is my sector B, etc. Obviously, this is a pretty small, cheesy example, but I had one client who had 42 sector plans on 36 by 48 sheets, and they had these divided, and somebody went through and kept creating all the dependent views, and then in every single one of them, they had to go place all these view references. I think the person spent about 2 weeks doing this. I wish I would have known, because what's great about this is if you right click on a parent view or a view with dependents, you have this option down here to say apply dependent views. Now, when I do this, it's going to pull up any view of the same scale. So you first got to go create a view of that scale to be able to apply the dependent to. So I'm going to come down here and just say, hey, I want to go apply this dependent view to this and say, okay. And now if I come down here to my enlarge plans, I automatically just created all those dependent views. Those dependent views have all of the view references already associated to them. So I just apply it, I do it, I'm done. Downside is it won't pick up on scope boxes. So I know there's tons of add-ins out there, Rushforth, Ideate, there's tons of add-ins that can kind of say, hey, mimic this view and create the same thing. But there's an API limitation of Revit to have it mimic all of the view view references and place those accordingly. So for me, I think it's pretty easy to go through and do it. I can use some sort of add-in or just go through and name it because I know dependent 1 is always going to be A, dependent 2 is going to be B, C, D. You'll get to know what it is. And I can multiple select. If I did it to this, I'm going to do it to the ceiling plans too. So I'm going to say apply dependent. I'm going to do it to that ceiling plan that's there too. So what I can actually do now is come down to this RCP, which you see the same ones there, but I can grab like these at the same time and then associate these if I wanted to the same scope box at the same time. I can say, oh, both of those are sector A's, both of these are sector B's, etc. I can start going through and associating these at the same time. And to me, yeah, this might be difficult, but it's a hell of a lot faster than trying to place every single one of these view references in every single one of the sheets. So that one to me, when I found that, was like, wow, this just probably saved me weeks worth of work.
A lot of drama in the room, Brian. People are losing their minds.
Yeah, I laughed. I remember probably about 10 years ago, I was at the Oz office and I showed that one, and somebody in the office crowd just looked at me and said, you suck. I'm like, excuse me? Like, I just spent a week creating dependent views and view references.
One thing I saw you do a second ago was right click and go to rename for your view. Do you want to know a shortcut to rename?
Yeah, it's F2.
Yeah, it's F2.
Yeah, but that's a Windows-based shortcut. And see, I'm eating food right now, so if I have to hit F2, I have to take my hand off the mouse.
So you prefer the long cut.
You
So
also slow click to rename, right?
yeah, you can also slow kick to rename it too, which that feature drives me crazy.
Brian, how do you get the halo around your cursor every time?
How do I get that?
Yeah.
It's a Windows setting under I think under the like impairment stuff, but you can have, when you hit control, you can get it to show your cursor. I actually have to do this for myself because if I have dual monitor set up and since I'm blind in one eye, I lose my cursor all the time. You also see my cursor is black because if it's white, I can't find it 90% of the time. So I have to do this just to find my cursor because I'm literally blind in an eye. So I don't know if you guys also like dependent views. I am a person who does not like dependent views. I personally cannot stand them because if you put a plan region in one view, it can affect other views. It forces people to constantly go in and say, hide and view this element, hide and view this element. And to me, it's just a pain in the ass. So what is also a right click that you can do after you've done this is you can actually say convert to independent. So you can actually use this to create the dependent views. If you want to keep them dependent, completely up to you. But for me, a lot of times I will then come say convert to independent, convert to independent, convert to independent. And now I've got just 4 independent views. But what's nice about this when I do it is the view titles, the view references all still remain. They all still understand that this is associated to that floor plan dependent too, et cetera, et cetera. So once you've done it, even if you convert it to be a dependent view, all these view titles still, view references, excuse me, still understand where they came from. So to me, that's kind of a step that, yeah, it's a few processes, and I've had some people complain about it. Then I have them go back and do it the old way and manually place these, and then they shut up. Okay, so some of the other things that you can also do, like when working in the project browser, I don't know if anybody ever does, but you can right click and you can go right to your browser organization. I would never use it to simply check and turn one of these on and off because, right, I can just grab the project browser and change it right here if I wanted to. But you do have the capability, depending on where you right click, to get different options. So if I right click on a legend, I can actually say, go create a new legend or a new keynote legend. So it's kind of a nice little option just to go in here and start creating different things like legends, etc. If you right click on a schedule, you can go create your schedules from right here. So if you're a person who hates going up to the ribbon and going view, schedules, wait, what kind of schedule did I need? Right click in the project browser and do the same thing. So you can right click on legends, schedules, and or sheets and create all of those independently. If you right click on families, you get the save option, which will take every single family in your project and save it out to a folder and give you all the options for that stuff. So this is a great way to actually troubleshoot a project that you might think is corrupt. You can actually save out all the families, and if there is a corrupt family, it will actually stop on that corrupt family and let you know I can't save this family, which lets you know it's a corrupt family. Since 2018, though, if people do a whole lot of dimensioning to extrusions, it'll actually now give you a warning dialog box saying this family may be unstable because you didn't dimension to reference planes. Kind of a drag because now it actually pauses each one of those. You have to be around a little bit, but still a great way to troubleshoot on right-clicking and saving on families. A lot of time things people don't know too is if you do right-click on different things, like if you right-click on a group, you can actually right-click on a group and you can duplicate this group. You can make the element editable. Of course, if you have no idea where that group is, it really doesn't do you a whole heck of a lot of good to go make the group editable. So what you can also do, and I actually like this, is you can actually edit this group. And what this is going to do is actually open the group as an RVT. So if you say, yes, you want to do this, it actually opens it independent of the project. And now you can just see this object as its own RVT file. And you can use this to actually save it out, which there's another step for too, if you need to use this group in multiple different project files. You can right click, edit the group, and then you can, it's just a simple Revit family or a Revit project. You would save it. And then if you did make edits to that, you would then right click and say, go ahead and reload. So you can reload the group. I didn't save it and bring it back in, but you can reload the group if you've saved it from an external file. One thing I like about this, especially in 2020, is if you edit the group, one of the new features in 2020 under site is to actually be able to show the, where's my site? Be able to show the internal origin. So if you actually grab a group and you edit a group, you can then actually see the internal origin, where it's going on. So here's my little internal origin marker right here. If you edit a group, you can see where the internal origin for that group is, which is different than the group's origin. So for me, if I'm creating groups, especially Revit 3D groups, I always like to know where that 00 is in the project. I like to know that that's my insertion point when I load it into the project as a group. So I really like to be able to edit that and see that in 2020.
Is everybody on 2020? Okay. It also annoys a lot of people because when you upgrade to 2020, it turned that internal origin on by default, and no one knew how to turn it off. It's under visibility graphics under site. It's called internal origin. All right. And a bunch of people made Dynamo scripts and Dynamo player things to automatically turn it off in projects, but right there, internal origin. It's basically Revit's 0,0. Yeah.
It was actually, wasn't that a 2020.1 issue? So if you upgraded to 2020, it was fine. But if you upgraded to 2020.1, then it broke it?
Yes, you're right.
Something like that. I don't remember the exacts, but I remember it wasn't the original Revit because I upgraded to one of the projects. So I had no problem. What's everybody talking about? Oh, I didn't have the latest service pack.
Yeah, 2020.1. Everybody knows we're up to 2020.2.1 now, right? Because of that issue. Right. Yeah, I had a little problem with families becoming corrupt. Tobias in the back nodding. Yeah. Okay. We had a little issue. So if you're on 2020.2, please make sure to go to the point release of that, the hot fix. It's a really critical issue. It can literally render your families in that project unusable. So seriously, like if you're on 2020.2, make sure to go to the 0.1 release of that, which is a hot fix.
And if you really don't want to, you can go ahead and reload every single family or rename every single family, and that'll make Revit rethink about it, which will keep it from breaking.
Yes. You can literally rename every family in the project if you want instead.
But it's only central files, right?
No, it can be any project, really.
Really?
Yeah. As far as I understand it. It was something that did not get caught in beta testing. It was a really weird, obscure. What was it, Brian? Something that it had to go.
It was any project that if you upgraded directly to 2020.2, it was fine. But if you previously upgraded it to 2020.1 or 2020 and then upgraded and installed the service pack is when it would break it.
Yeah.
If you started a project brand new from a template, not from like an RVT that you guys use as a template, but from a template, it would have been fine as well.
That was a big hairy deal. So.
Yeah, and there's also now issues with a whole bunch of people on the service pack not actually installing properly for people too. So I think there's going to be another one coming out soon.
2021, right around the corner.
Yes. Yeah, it's called 2021. right along with groups, the other thing I did talk about is you can actually save a group out. So if you have a group, you want to save this group out, go out to another project. Ironically, I've worked with firms who do one Revit file as like let's say multifamily. They do one little multifamily and they make it a group. And the reason they make it a group is then they can edit that group right inside of Revit. Then they can save that group out and it overwrites the RVT that's there. Then all of the rest of the units, all other 250 of them are Revit links. So then they can just go reload the Revit links. They can edit the group, save the group, reload the link, which is the group, and then update it that way as well. So it's a little bit confusing, but you do have the capability to do that. With most thing in Revit too, you can actually get to the type properties of it. And part of the reason why I'm showing this on groups, it's the same as Revit links. A lot of people don't understand that there are instance-based work sets as well as type-based work sets for a lot of things. Groups and Revits are some of the groups, and Revit links are some of those. So you can right-click and get to the type properties to see what's going on with certain things as well, including family types as well. If you've got links open, one thing that's great is you can right-click on a Revit link and you can go right to your Manage Links dialog box. You don't have to. I always see people struggle finding it. Like, where is that? Is that under Manage? Is that under Insert? Where's my Manage Links? You can right-click on the Revit links and go directly to your Revit links, Manage Links tab up there. You can also insert a new link right from here as well, which takes you to the Import Revit Link dialog and bring in a new one directly from here. If you have links already loaded, you can right-click on the link itself and you can reload it. You can do a reload from, you can do the Manage Work Sets, you can unload it for all users or for you if it's a work shared file. A lot of different options just by right-clicking in the project browser. A lot of times for me, I start getting into this and it's really, really easy to find it here to do things than it is to try to find out where it is in the view that somebody turned it off, etc. So I do a lot of stuff with Revit links just simply by right-clicking on them in the project browser. And if you need to change like instance properties, obviously you can do a select all instances on these things as well. So I do a lot with those types of things in the project browser.
Brian, go back to Manage Links real quick, the dialog box.
Sorry, I'm having my eye is crusting over on me right now. Oh, up above. So it's really hard for me to see currently.
So one thing I want to make sure that you guys are aware of that got fixed in 2020.2, save path if you're working in BIM 360 design, anything prior to 2020.2, that save path dialog box in BIM 360 design projects, single path. So if you're trying to path into a shared folder or consume folder, that path did not display correctly until 2020.2. Does now. So just be aware of that. A lot of people got confused. They come to this dialog box, it would say BIM 360 / have a path. Be like, oh, I'm pathed to this folder. Technically, no, you weren't. It was something weird. I don't know exactly what happened, but now in 2020.2, that's fixed. The BIM 360 path is correct. Just want to make sure I pointed that out.
You know, the other thing in here too that I do often that I don't see people doing is, does everybody know that you can unload the file just for you? This is one thing to me that cracks me up. I'll go to clients' offices and I open up their projects. Like, oh my God, your project opened in like 3 minutes. It takes like 10 minutes for me to open this project. It's like, well, yeah, you have 27 links and I have them all unloaded for me and I turn them on and off as I need to. So you could actually unload links just for you and it doesn't affect anybody else in your project. And you'll see it has a little asterisk here saying not loaded. And you'll also see here, it's got a little X by a person, which means it's just being unloaded for that one user. So it's kind of nice. You can actually do this, which will definitely speed up your Revit process and thinking as you go through it. So that's a not tip that I was going to show, but another little tip inside of there. So if you right click on families in the project browser, this is a tip that I use often. So I'm going to go down here. Sure, here's a casework. I use this often, and I use this often, especially when I'm dealing with different types of contents. Let's say you wanted to use a different section head because this project uses national CAD standards, or you want to load a different casework family or a different door family. What's great about this is if you go insert load family, you've then got to select all the instances and change them. And if it's something like a section head, that means going through 3 or 4 dialog boxes to change it. There might be a legend component of that in one of the symbol legends. But if you just right click on a family and say reload, you can go swap it out. I'm going to grab the double door and swap it out for a single door because, hey, we're not using that anymore. What's great about this is, I'm in casework, you can go through and do this. And once you set this up, you're just going to be like, ooh, that was door single. Here we go. I've just literally changed every single one of those out to be a single door family. Now, the bizarre part is I might have 4-foot width double door cabinets and I can't have a single family at 4 feet. But sometimes, depending on what you're doing, that will bring in and change a whole lot of different things. So you don't have to go through and start tracking it down and figuring out what's going on. The other thing you can do with families, if you do have a family on here, if you right click on the parent, you can say make a new type. So if you say make a new type, it's basically like duplicating it, but it's not necessarily pulling any of the parameters that you may or may not want to be using on there. It basically gives you a default one to do it. Or you can right click and say duplicate as well, and duplicate one if you only need to change one or two of the values. So it does work really, really well. You also get create instance. I personally never use this because create instance to me is exactly the same thing as dragging and dropping off of the screen. I rarely go to the component command to load things. I place things and drag and drop, including walls, windows, doors, pretty much anything can be dragged and dropped from the project browser, and it just puts you right in the command to be able to start placing that. So that's another one of the features that I do often. Another thing that's great too is, let's say you were like, man, I needed this cabinet to be a 32-inch cabinet. And we all know a lot of times if you select an object, especially like a detail component, and you hit the type selector on a large project, you could be waiting for minutes for that to come up. If I know I wanted that not be a 30-inch, but a 36-inch, you could select it, right-click and say match. This is true for groups. This is true for families, whatever. And I can say match, click this. And it's basically the same thing as the Revit match tool that you have up here. You'll see it actually took me to the match, but it just saves you from having to find that one first to swap it out for the other one. And I use this a lot with detail components because you select a detail component, you go to change it, I swear to God, you could be waiting for 5 minutes for the stupid thing to open on large projects. I find it over here, right click, match, pick, I'm done. So that's another. What was that? Was that a comment? I couldn't hear.
So why doesn't drag and drop work in group edit mode?
Oh, I don't know. I wonder if create instance would. Let's see.
I think it does.
Create group. Sure. Can we right click? Say edit group. Can we right click and say create instance? So there you go. That's when you would use the create instance that I never used before. Yeah, because I know drag and drop doesn't work in group mode, but create instance does. Makes zero sense to me, but there you go. There's your answer. I now need to add that to my PowerPoint online slide. You guys now have to wait because I got to make that note. I got to make that note in my handout. Okay. See, that's why I do these presentations. I learn tips from people, or we find tips together. All right. Type properties, type properties. So this is kind of one of my biggest things that I've ever shown people. I was at one of my conferences and I did something just that I do all the time. And the person came back and said, wait, what did you just do? I'm like, oh, I just did this. And they're like, holy crap. And I had like 80 tweets go out about this tip. None about my entire session, just this one tip. So has anybody ever paid attention to the padlocks? Is anybody crazy enough like me to right click on everything and realize that when you grab a padlock and you right click on that padlock, you can actually say show related. And what the show related actually means is for this one dimension segment, what is it related to? You'll see that it brings up this very terrible dialogue, but it just says Autodesk Revit, and it tells me that, oh, it's dimensioning grid 2 and grid 3, right? That one was pretty obvious, but there's often times where I start coming over here and I'm like, man, I wonder, did I dimension the wall? Did I dimension the grid? Did I dimension the countertop, the floor? I use this often when I'm doing those types of things to right click on this grid, and I'm gonna hide this one because it's gonna keep picking that. And I say show related, and in this case, you think you're just getting the grid. When I come over here, I'm gonna say, oh yeah, it's grid 4, ooh, whoops, and I dimensioned the wall. And you can see it even highlights the wall down here, letting me know what I dimensioned.
It's better when they're constrained too. Like if that was locked, doesn't it show that what it's locked to?
It's the same difference.
Yeah.
Doesn't care if it's locked or not. I laughed because a couple years ago, somebody in the beta said, we need to know what we dimensioned. Can you guys please add that? I'm like, it's been there forever. I've known about this tip for at least a decade when it's there. The reason why I usually come up with this, like you'll be like, I'm gonna grab grid 5. Why isn't this dimension activating? Why can't I use that dimension to change it? Well, because you didn't dimension the grid, you dimensioned something else. So it's one of those tools that I love.
Cycle through. Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Can you hit that little blue dot at the end and cycle through what it's actually associated with?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Spoilers.
Steal the thunder. Wow.
After the break.
No, no,
So-
just set you up, buddy.
So I knew about that tip with the padlock. I never once thought to right click on equal. But if you right click on equal, you get the same show related. Now, how the hell can show related actually work? It doesn't care. What this is the entire dimension string. So it's showing me I'm dimensioning grid 1, grid 2, grid 3, grid 4, and the wall. So I can cycle through an entire dimension string by right clicking on the equal grid to see what's going on. To me, this one's huge. Like, oh, what is this going to? What am I having the problem with? When I'm in the family editor environment and I use temporary dimensions all the time, or excuse me, not temporary dimensions, automatic sketch dimensions. I don't know if anybody ever uses this in the family world. Terrible in the project world, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Now, when you turn on automatic sketch dimensions and you start grabbing things like this wall, ooh, it's not coming up. In a family world, it'll start giving you all these blue dimensions, letting you know, hey, you dimensioned this to this, etc. You can right click on the padlock in the temporary automatic sketch dimensions, excuse me, and it will show you, oh, that this dimension is showing me going from the reference plane to the center line of this arc or something stupid. So you can actually see what Revit's trying to make those associativities to as well on that show related. With that said, have you guys ever seen the padlock come up like on your grid and you're like, man, you grab it and you're like, why didn't grid A or grid Z or one of these other grids move with it? You right click on the padlock here and hit show related. Again, it's going to show you that grid A, B, C, D, and Z all line up. I also laugh because it then shows you kind of how you dimensioned. It says grid A, then B, then it goes to D. Because when I dimensioned this, I went A, B, D, and then came back and dimensioned C. So it actually kind of even shows you possibly how you dimension these objects. So it shows you like a hierarchy of how you selected to create those dimensions as well. Okay. I actually found out today, and I don't even know why I accidentally did this, but if you have an object selected and you right click on the make elements editable, it will actually give you show related as well and let you know that that's pointing to this object. I have no idea why you would ever use that, but it does show you that. Downside to me on this dialog box is if it's related to something that's got a very long name, this dialog box is not stretchable. You can't do anything with it. So what I've had to do is like double click in here, hit Control A, or try to cycle through it all, and then copy to clipboard and paste into other objects. Drives me crazy that Revit doesn't give me this expandable dialog box, but most of the time my names aren't too crazy to see what's going on.
That's small enhancements, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tiny.
Brian, I remember a project where we made every dialogue resizable, and somehow that one
Got missed.
slipped.
Oh, there's like 30 dialog boxes that aren't resizable.
Oh, let's make a list.
Can you make a list of those, Brian, please? In your spare time.
Okay, what do I call this dialogue? It doesn't have a bloody name.
Show related.
Show related dialogue. Email Tobias.
I don't know if that even counts as a dialogue box.
Yeah, it's a reporting box.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah, I really don't know. So I think that you get also when you're looking at like just simply looking at walls, etc. A lot of people know that you can right click. Did you know you can right click and say change walls orientation? So basically that's just going to flip the wall based off of its location line. So not a huge deal. I think most everybody now knows that you can right click on the wall grip and say disallow join and allow you to disallow the join. So Revit's no longer going to make these clean up. Did I miss it? No, I did not. So the walls aren't going to clean up. The one tip that I actually like on this a lot when I'm showing people is I get so often people like, oh, I wanted this wall to be 22 feet. So they start dragging the grip or they want to type in the number and they just want to type in the value. If you start dragging the grip, you can then use your other hand to type in the value and it'll give you that length. But if you right click and say drag in, I'm not holding my mouse down right now. So now I can go in and type, keeping my food in my left hand and not having to dirty up my keyboard with my greasy donut hands. So the right click move in will allow you to go through and change, or just simply start typing in the value all with the same hand and not having to hold this down. Where
his wife just sent me a picture of his steak.
yeah, I'm actually got a great nice steak and fried green beans and plenty here, but you know, donut's a better joke. I'm not holding steak in my hand. Okay, you hold in your hand.
Given that you have pink eye, Brian, this whole conversation is grossing me out.
Yeah, it's a very pink steak too.
Hey, Brian, since you're eating and also, you know, it's your time, what do you think about a break? You want to?
That's fine. Perfect. Let's take a break. So So I should have covered this one last tip before we went for break, because this is the last thing I had on the right clicks. But if you guys use stacked walls, and I'm not a huge fan of them, but if you select a stacked wall and you right click, you can actually hit the break up. So you can break these two up, and so you can convert it to two independent walls. I do like to say it's kind of more like a divorce than a breakup.
Exactly.
Well, the reason why I say that, it's a divorce with children, because there's still some sort of relationship between these two things. And I've seen a lot of issues happen where you break it up thinking the walls are independent, but then all of a sudden you do something to one wall and the other wall does it as well. So it's more of a divorce than a breakup. So there's still some sort of relationship going there, and they're always
financially related in some way.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to figure out like why they're still there, why it still goes, but you can see it just basically takes that wall, gives it a base offset, makes this one unconnected at whatever height it was. So you can break up walls. I still don't use stack walls that often, so I'm not a huge fan of this tool either, but at least this is a way to get you out of it.
It's a mere 4 days after Valentine's Day, Brian.
Breaking up walls.
Save
That's
that for
funny.
next year. What a tweet.
Okay. So as Tobias wanted me to do, there's a whole lot of tips that I show with dimensions that you can start getting into. So one of the things I see people do is like they want to just eliminate one of these dimension strings. Like, man, I really didn't want this going all the way across, or I didn't need to dimension this grid or whatever. So a lot of times I'll see people editing the witness line to pick this, to click off to the side to say, no, I didn't want that. But what's great is if you right click on the middle grip, and I'm gonna actually grab this dimension style because it's easier to display, but if you right click on this move witness line grip, you can say delete witness line and remove that right there. I prefer this because a lot of times I'll see people like clicking something that they thought was dimensioned, and then they added 0 length dimension string because it wasn't the wall that was dimensioned, it was the countertop or the grid line or whatever else. So for me, I'm not big into saying edit witness line and then clicking what I thought was dimensioned. I just right click on this grip and say delete witness line.
Does that still break any extra text you add to that dimension string?
So you mean if I add this one, say like, hey, this is VIF, and then I go delete witness line? Yes, it does, because it's now a new, oh, it doesn't. It's now a new string. Okay. The other thing that I love about this move witness line grip is I think most people know that you can select it and drag it to something else. So you can take that and drag it to something else and start moving it around and what you drug it to. What I don't think everybody knows is you can simply click it and go from the center line of an object to the right side of the object to the left side of the object. And if you're doing it on walls based on what that dimension style is set to, in this case, faces of core, it's going from core center line to the core face to the core face. If this was set to faces of wall, it'd go from wall face to wall space to wall center line. So you can just click the grip. You don't even have to like come down here and drag it to move it. You can just click. If your families are created properly by using the correct is references, you can also do that for families where I can just click the grip and move it from one side to the other. Family has to be created properly for this to work, but you can simply go through and do that. This is also true for temporary dimensions. So if I grab this temporary dimension and click the grip, you can see I'm going from one side to the middle, back to the other side with the temporary dimensions as well. So you have the capability to not only do it with real dimensions, you have the capability to do it with temporary dimensions as well.
Which can be made permanent right there, right? Everybody knows that.
Yeah, that stupid, I call that demo feature, the button that you accidentally click 1,000 times for every one time you want to use it.
Yeah.
Terrible tool. That's a demo feature. Oh, look, I don't have to actually use the dimension tool. I can just say make permanent. Yeah, no, nobody uses it.
Can you hit spacebar to do the same thing?
Did you hear the question?
Spacebar, no, because you're not looking at a single dimension string, and Revit doesn't really know what to do with the whole entire dimension.
What drives those temporary dimensions? Like they always seem to default to some random thing on the wall.
So they will default to the next closest family or whatever your setting is for temporary dimensions. So my temporary dimensions in this case are set up to core face, and you can always adjust that by going into your additional settings, temporary dimensions, and you can tell it what you want to go to, faces of core, faces of walls, center lines, or center lines of doors or openings of the edges of them.
Thanks.
So you have the capability. What they snap to also comes into play, and I always have a huge thing on temporary dimensions I usually talk about, is they're snapping to the reference planes inside of the family. So they're looking to the right and left is reference, or the center line is reference, depending on your family and how it's set up. If no reference planes are defined as the is reference, it'll snap to the insertion point reference plane that's in the family. And there's pre-built rules to a lot of that stuff. So if you really, really, really want to screw with people in your office, you notice if I select this, I'm going to the right side and the left side of this. You really want to screw with people, go into the families and reverse the right and left. So you'll see that this one's is reference is left and this one's is reference is right. That's how they should be. But if you really want to screw with somebody, go make this one the left and make this one the right. And then when they load this into their project, load in project and close, don't save, overwrite, yes. And now when I grab this door, temporary dimensions are reversed.
An April Fool's joke?
That's so messed up. That is messed up.
No, so always in a family, on the plan view, the right is the right, the left is the left. Because there are pre-built rules to those is references when they get loaded into Revit project.
Does it spin the other way down under?
No, depends on the design of the object. So another thing about a dimension string, if you want to break a dimension string into 2 dimension strings, you can actually use the tab key to grab the shape handle, as they call it, underneath the dimension. I have no idea why this is called the shape handle, but you can tab to grab the shape handle, and you can select the individual dimension string or the individual dimension segment. And if you grab that dimension segment, you can then use the delete key and delete that segment out of there, breaking this up into 2. There is no way to merge them back together. I wish there were. So if I were to say edit witness line, I can bring it back, but I can never get those to merge back together. God dang it, I hate that. It just is, it is what it is. A thing that they released, and Paul Aubin actually discovered this one and asked me, how long has this been there? You can use the align command in Revit, and you can actually align dimensions.
Nice.
Not a huge deal, and I actually went back to 2017 or 16 and it was there. I was dumbfounded it was there. But where this becomes really nice is if you draw a reference plane and you've got dimensions from floor to floor to floor to ceilings, reflected ceiling plans, whatever, you can align your dimension strengths to those reference planes. You can't align it to the shape handle, as they call when you tab. You have to align it to actually the end. So I can align this end to this end, but I can't align it to the actual dimension itself. You have to grip the little endpoints. Don't ask me, but that's just how it is. Now, the other thing that works really, really, really well inside of Revit, and I see almost nobody ever actually use this, is when you have a dimension string selected, you've got this value over here for equality display. And most people know this is there if they have something they dimension and they hit equal on. I have nothing to do it with, so let me just draw a few grid lines up here, right? Everybody knows that they can come in here and do something like this, and these are all terrible spacings, but I don't care. And if we dimension all 3 of these and hit equal, we actually can get it to say equal, equal, equal. But if you didn't want to see that equality text, you can change it from equality text to the value. Right? And this is going to display the value rounding to whatever your dimension units are inside of there. But in something like this, I have the same equality value at the beginning and the end. I can change it from value to equality text, and it's going to tell me those 2 things are equal. There's no equality constraint here. I still have the red line going through the equal. It's not equally spacing all of them, but if they're consistent at each end, it will give me the equality text for that. Or maybe back up here, even in this scenario, I want it to be equal. I want it to read equal, but I don't want that as an equal constraint, right? So I want this to say equal, but I don't want that equal constraint. I don't want it to be moving both of them. So again, I can come up here and say, show me the equality text. And then if one of them moves, that's not moving it. If one of them moves, then it just breaks the equality text. The other option that you have with dimensions that I rarely see used, if I edit this witness line and bring it over here, that's great. I've got this equality text. Does anybody have dimensions set up to use equality formulas? So the equality formula, what's great about that is this is just going to tell me, oh, I've got 3 segments, all totaling 13, 2, and 7/16. You can edit that based on your dimension style. So all the way at the bottom of your dimension style, there's this equality formula. This equality formula right now, it's just saying, give me the number of segments and the total length. I could say, I want the length of each segment. So I can say length of segments, I'm going to move that up. So I can say, gee, I'm going to put an equal here. I'm going to put an at symbol here, right? So now I'm saying there's this many segments at this, which equals that. Say, okay, I'm going to say, okay. And now I've got 3 at this distance equaling this. works great for stairs, works great for structural engineers for beam spacing, which is why we got that was for them. But rarely do I see anybody ever setting up dimension styles using equality formulas.
Nice.
So the other thing you have on dimension types, and again, unless you're a contractor, I don't really see too many people using this, but you can do dimensions like we do architecturally, or for my contractors, a lot of my contractors are adopting this scenario, but they just want to know how far of a distance was I from the beginning. Not the distance between each one or the distance from the previous one, how far was I from the beginning on this? So I want to know so I can hook my tape measure on the end of that slab and just go 5 feet, 11 feet, 16 feet, 28 feet. It's a great utility to have. If you do have these ordinate dimensions set, you also can right click or hit the arrows and say flip dimension direction. So you always have this in a right click, but it's usually grayed out. But now you can say flip dimension directions and I can actually tell it to 0 to go from one end to the other end, depending on where I'm looking. Not only do you have ordinate dimensions, you also can do baseline. I'm not a big fan of baseline. They take up way too much space. Basically the same thing as a baseline, but it's going across and doing it. And this is still one dimension string. This is not me going through and doing something special. If I go back to a default linear dimension style, I can swap it out between what we're looking at there. I'll do a few times.
That's very handy for existing conditions because you really should measure a building from one point instead of adding up a whole bunch of little pieces.
Yeah, I use this feature quite often. The other thing is on any dimension, if you take any piece of text and you move it off to the side, or even if you just slightly bump it and you didn't realize you did it, you can right click on dimension string and you do have reset dimension text position. It does not do one piece of text, it does all text on the string. But if you've done something weird like move the 0 or accidentally bump a whole bunch of them, again, you can right click and say reset text position. As well. Now, another thing that I get asked often in the Revit world is, I'm so used to inches from AutoCAD. I don't want to type 12 feet. If I want to move that, I want to type in an inch value. What's great about Revit is if you notice that we select things, all these dimensions become temporary or enabled dimensions, right? If I grab this dimension string and I duplicate this type, and I'm going to change one to be inches, inched, I guess, and I change my units format from feet and fractional inches just to fractional inches, and I say, okay, now when I select this, I can actually type 120, and it's not gonna be 120 feet, it's actually just gonna be 120 inches. So it'll look to the value set up in your dimensioning to be able to allow you to choose or type in that type of input you want. So I do this quite often because there's a lot of times I'm just thinking in inches. So I have working dimensions that are in inches and I just go through and start using those and typing in my inch value. If it is an inch value, it's no big deal. You can say, no, I wanted 10 feet. You can still use the foot mark and it'll give it to you at 10 feet. You don't have to know your inch values. The other thing great about Revit, did you know you can also go 10 feet, 6 inches? So if you really, really want to keep your hands on a keyboard, you can use the foot, FT and IN for inches. You can also use dashes. So 10 foot 6. You don't have to use the foot mark. That's usually what I do because that's easier to 10 key in. You can also use a space, 10 foot 6. Or if you really were just looking at inches, you can always type in foot, as opposed to the shift quotes. So a foot symbol will be the same as inches in the Revit workflow. So a lot of different ways to change it out. And if you're really crazy and you're like, no, I wanted that to be 3 meters, you can type in M and it'll get it to you the 3 meter value. It doesn't care as long as you tell it what you want to do. Same thing would be true if you're doing angles. You can type in an angle value, or you can do formulas like the arctangent, the rise over the run, or I wanted this to be 32 CMU courses. As long as you start with an equal symbol, you can actually say, hey, gee, I wanted that to be 32 CMU courses. So 32 times 16. You can do all sorts of crazy formulas inside of there. Here's probably my favorite underutilized tool in Revit. Many people pay attention to the options bar when they're dimensioning. Most people have paid attention to this faces of core. Very few people actually pay attention to the pick option next to it. The pick option next to it allows me to say, instead of dimensioning individual things, I want to grab an entire wall. And on that entire wall, I have options of what I can start selecting. If I leave it blank with no options, I can pick a wall and get an overall wall's length. If there's multiple walls in the thing, I can pick that wall and then start just doing multiple walls. So rather than going pick, 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 I can just start grabbing, hey, I want to grab this wall, I want to grab this wall, I want to grab this wall, 3 clicks as opposed to 4 clicks. And I didn't have to zoom in and pay attention to what I was looking at. Again, it still looks 2 faces of core. So these dimensions are going to the faces of the core of that wall. Of course, I grabbed the finished walls, which don't have a core. But you can start to see very, very quick and easy to do. If you do have options on, you can go say, I want to dimension all my openings. So then if I just grab this wall, boom, it's going to dimension all of those openings for me. Again, if I'm saying the openings, am I going to the centers or to the widths? Pick the wall, boom, there's my openings. So a lot of different options. If you work on very large buildings, I will never, ever, ever click each grid to dimension it. I go draw some arbitrary wall. I don't care what the wall is. I cross all of my grid lines. I then go to my dimension command. I change this to entire walls, and my option is intersecting grids. I say, okay, I grab, oops. Did I get it? Intersecting grids. Oh, that's my stacked wall. I got a tab select. Do a tab select because it's a stacked wall. Place it. I just dimensioned every single grid. So if you have more than 9 grids, it's fewer clicks to do that. Draw the wall, do it. When you're done, delete the wall. Delete. And your dimensions stay. Those are 2 that I use often. I use them a lot on working views just to make sure what's going on, because the only downside about dimensioning and using the intersecting walls is, first off, it must be a wall that tees into it. So this case it'll work, but it will go to either side of the wall, which most people aren't doing this as their standard dimension types. So capable to do, most people aren't actually doing it that way. So my working views, I do this all of the time. So therefore I can just quickly throw down a dimension string. It does not work if the wall runs through it. So if the wall does not stop, but if it's a teed wall, for some reason, that is not an intersecting wall. I don't understand why, but that is not an intersecting wall.
It's a T-wall.
It's a T-wall, not an intersecting wall. The other thing that's great, and most people don't use this feature as well, I do have a lot of structural engineers and or contractors and some residential architects doing this, but one of the other type properties you have in a dimension style is you can actually come down here all the way at the bottom and somewhere, where is it? Checkbox, show opening height. So I can say I want to know how big that opening is. Automatically, if I've dimensioned an opening, it tells me, oh, that's a 3.0 by 7.0 opening. I didn't do anything to my dimension. I didn't have anything else to do. Now, anytime I dimension an opening, entire wall, options, I'm actually not even going to do the entire wall. I'm just going to go back and do individual reference. But you will see if I grab like from here to here to here to here, I automatically got that opening to it. So it doesn't have to use the entire wall option, just as long as you're dimensioning to the reference planes in the family, it'll give you those opening sizes for you. And then it'll pick up on the height as well. All right, there's a couple other things that I always like to talk about. Some of them are just Revit keyboard shortcuts. I'm not a big keyboard shortcut person, but I always like to talk about the keyboard shortcut dialog box for 2 reasons. One, you can get to it via user interface keyboard shortcuts. Ironically, if you're a keyboard shortcut person, you're probably typing a keyboard shortcut to get to it. So you can type in KS if you really want to get to the keyboard shortcut. But one thing I love about this is, anybody ever had a command that they know they like the command, they know what the command's called, they have no idea where it is in the ribbon to access it. So if you come in here and just start typing in the search, like, ooh, cut, this will show you every command that starts with cut, and then it shows you what part of the ribbon is on. Oh, that's on the modify tab on the search on the geometry panel. I can go to it to get it there. So the keyboard shortcut really gives you a nice sorts of set to come in here and start looking at it. The other thing I always start to tell people too is start looking at what's there. Because if I go to the rotate command, and I know most people, and actually it's not even the rotate command. I'm going to delete that a second. There's a command in here that I see people who use 2-key shortcuts all the time. I laugh that they don't use this. I'm going to go say all defined. I'm going to sort them alphabetically by their shortcut. There is a command in here that I've discovered. This was, I think it was 2014. Under the R's, and there's an R3 shortcut in here. The R3 shortcut, if I can find it. goes into rotate and defines the center axis of rotation all at the same time. So if you're trying to rotate something, that's a group, sure, I'll use that. I can type in R3, and now it's automatically taking me into rotate and setting me up to place the center rotation. I don't have to hit rotate, come down here and click place or drag it. I can be like, no, that's where I want my base point to be. So there are a lot of commands in there that I didn't even know existed or that you could get access to simply by going into the keyboard shortcut. It's like, oh, wow, what does this command do? What does that command mean? Oh, check it out. So keyboard shortcuts are kind of one of those ones to me when I get into it. The other thing nice about those, I know a lot of people are starting to add a lot of add-ins, right? More and more people are getting add-ins. So if I really start to come in here and say place, there's a command that I use all the time, and it's called place origin marker. I'll just type in the word origin maybe, right? So there's a place origin marker that I love this command in Revit, but you can add keyboard shortcuts to any of the, I shouldn't say any, but to a lot of the add-in programs that you may have. They have to be up on the ribbon, but you can start adding things to those. So really, really becomes nice to be able to start adding them for your custom add-ins as well. Okay, yes?
Question. Is there a reason why sometimes you try to override a shortcuts file and it works, other times it doesn't, just randomly?
You mean by exporting it? Or just the command?
When you import like a shortcuts from a previous version and it will overwrite some and not others?
Not sure, because I don't ever import. I don't use a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I only have like 5 or 6 defined, and I just redefine them each time. I don't import them because my Desiree does, and when she does it, she's been importing them like since Revit Structure 2. And so like she doesn't even have half the 2-key shortcuts that are new to all of the new commands. So for me, I rarely import the entire thing, because for me, I just keep a list of the ones I've changed and changed them. Because if you start doing that, then you literally are starting to lose out on 2-key shortcuts that like a lot of other people use. Plus it forces most people to learn the out-of-the-box ones. I'm not saying they're all the best. Like I have customized the one for dimension. I've added DD to dimension because I think DI is stupid. But I didn't get rid of DI because I want to be able to still have people who are used to DI as a shortcut not be broken when they come and use my machine. But yeah, I don't know why it doesn't, because honest truth, I never import. It's kind of like the old AutoCAD Express or AutoCAD upgrade. When you put a new version of AutoCAD, like, would you like to import your settings from the previous version? It would break AutoCAD. It's not quite that bad in Revit, but.
To get to the visibility graphics menu, how do you do it?
It's out of the box, it's VV or VG, but half the time for me, a lot of times for me too, there's things like I might be wanting to change the visibility of a view. I might not even be in that view. So for me, a lot of times I just do visibility graphics in the properties. This is also why for me, properties is docked right here. I know I see some people put it on the right or put it on a second monitor, but for me, I'm going to go to the wall command. I don't care if you use the 2-key shortcut for wall, but then I've got to come over here to change it to the wall type I want. And then I've got to come up here to change the options. So for me, I think this all should be stacked right here underneath the ribbon, because for speed of usefulness, I think it's more useful that way. Cool. And for a lot of the commands that I use often, I customize the quick access toolbar. So I've added this is 2020, I don't got them all in there yet, but I add a lot of tools to the quick access toolbar as opposed to 2-key shortcuts. Plus when I'm doing presentations, then people can actually see what I'm doing, and suppose there's just magic happening behind the scenes.
How often do you use R3 on a daily basis?
Rarely, because I don't do a whole lot of rotating. I do use sunglasses 2-key shortcuts often. So I do use the hide category, so HE. The other 2-key shortcut that I don't think most people know about, which to me is the best 2-key shortcut, VH. So if I wanted to turn off scope boxes, right, I'd go into visibility graphics, I'd go to annotation, I'd scroll down to the S's, and I'd uncheck scope boxes. Well, if I really want to do that a quick way, if you select an element in Revit and type in VH, which is visibility hide, it will do that same step for you, assuming there's not a view template associated to the view. So VH to me is a big one. I see a lot of people, because they don't want to do that, they're like, right click, hide and view this element. It's like, no, you can go hide and view category, and that's the same thing. But I personally like VH, it's just a little bit quicker. I do the right click, hide and view category often as well, because I don't want to put the donut down.
XX was always a good one, close hidden windows until we tabbed the views.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody's used to WT for Windows tiles. Everybody hated 19 that you can't double click like every other freaking program on the planet to make that a full screen. In Revit, it's TW for tabbed views. So you get Windows tile and tabbed view, tabbed windows. So if you didn't know that one, and from 19 and older and up. I usually have those both up here on my shortcuts too. There's also a reason why I don't use a lot of shortcuts. Is a lot of shortcuts don't work in areas like schedules. How many people have seen a Revit schedule where the first column says WT at the top or Z?
Yeah.
I see it all the time on printed documents. I just sit there and laugh, going, "Yeah, you didn't use 2 key shortcuts."
Anybody have any favorite keyboard shortcuts?
Favorites?
Yeah.
Create similar.
Create similar. Yes.
Snap element.
Create similar is a good one. Snap element, align. Align's a good one.
Yeah, I still don't understand why Autodesk decided adjust analytical should be AA as opposed to align, because nobody uses adjust analytical in the structural world.
Well, it's the same thing in the old AutoCAD days that C was circle and not copy, right?
Yeah.
It's stuff a lot more than drawing circles. In the kind of the analytical days, I remember from the AutoCAD days, if you opted into the Autodesk program, it basically said, "Do you mind if we monitor your commands?" The most used AutoCAD command, you take a guess? Escape and or delete are the 2 #1 most used commands.
And undo.
Jam is.
Yeah, yeah. So I was an AutoCAD user back in Windows days. Anybody go back to Windows days in AutoCAD?
I go back to the DOS-based days, Scott. Thank you very much.
Yeah, DOS days, right? So DOS before Windows. So in DOS, before escape was Control C, right? Is how you got out of the command. So you got used to doing Control C with 2 fingers. So when it went to Windows, you know, copying a lot of stuff to the clipboard, right? And then it became escape. There was like always you always just like a 5, and then you only need
Then
one.
you hit the F1 key and open up 5 helps. So you just remove the F1 key from your keyboard.
Yeah, like physically remove it.
You can double up shortcuts, so MM for move, so you don't have to move your fingers around.
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can use more than 2 characters for shortcuts too. You can make them 3. You just have to type really fast.
Yeah, the only downside to that is if you have one that's got a 2, like I'll have some people like, "Ooh, I want this 2 key shortcut to be ZEL, right, for something else." The problem you have, and what most people know, is if you start typing a 2 key shortcut, if you actually look down at my status bar when I start typing a 2 key shortcut, if I start with a 2 key shortcut, I can then use the arrow keys to see every 2 key shortcut that starts with the Z. Right? When I get to the one I want, I can hit enter. So if you end up making a 3 key shortcut that has the first 2 characters the same as a 2 key character, you're now forcing yourself to hit enter on that 2 key character. So I'm not a big fan of doing 3. You can do 3, 4, 5, 6 and make them whatever you want. But the other thing that's really crazy about Revit is like, if you were to go in and set up section as SC for your 2 key shortcut, and you set that up, you can actually have snap center as SC, but Revit is smart enough to know that if I'm just sitting here not doing a command, SC is not going to be snap center, it's going to be section, because I need to go through and draw a section. I can't snap to anything because I'm not in a command. So you can even have duplicate keyboard shortcuts if some of those keyboard shortcuts are reactive as opposed to just invoking a command.
Yes.
So you do have that option. And there actually are now, in 2018, I think it was, they actually came in and started adding a few 3, I'll define. They actually did add quite a few of 3 character shortcuts, but most of it's for the MEP. I said all define, not fine. It's all mostly for the MEP fabrication tools. But there are several actually 3 key shortcuts now.
End of day.
End of day.
What your keyboard shortcuts are? Export. Right? There's a little export thing down at the bottom. You can take it off your list. In case you don't know them all.
Okay, so the other things that there are some keyboard short commands that I do use. Anybody ever used like the move command? So if I grab this object and I go to hit move and I'm starting to move this, and you want to be in constrain or constrain is on and you want it off, if you hold the shift key, that toggles constrain. So holding the shift key down, which I actually don't use the keyboard on this. I have a mouse set up to have shift on it. So I'm holding my mouse shift button, but I have shift down and that will toggle constrain, or if you unselect it, it will get rid of strain. You also can hold down control, and control switches move to copy. So if I grab the move command but hold control, I've now made a copy of that object. In the old versions of Revit, move and copy used to be the same command. There was just a checkbox here that said copy, and you could toggle it between move and copy. When they switched to the ribbon, they got rid of that, but the control aspect of that still resides.
So shortcut to turn off constrain?
Yeah, shift. As stupid as it sounds, if constrain is on, shift is a toggle. It'll either toggle it on or toggle it off, depending on how it's set. So really, really bizarre. Shift does that. The other thing that I like about control is like I use the align command often. What I don't like is going, stupid. What I don't like about the align command is I like using multiple, but I forget to untoggle it. So the next time I do align, I'm like screwing things up. But if you pick your base object, sure, we'll grab this grid. If you pick your base object and then hold control, notice what's happening is I hit my control key. Multiple is being toggled. So I can just use the align command, hold control and be like, ooh, I wanted to align that. I wanted to align that. And I'm still in the normal control align. I don't have to toggle control and come back and toggle it off when I'm done. So you can use control to toggle a lot of different things as well. And I'm sure most people know that you can control tab to cycle through your views, but you can control shift tab to go backwards. It's the same as Windows. If you're using your Windows, Alt Windows tab, so you can use Alt Windows to tab through your views. If you Alt Shift tab, see it goes backwards. So the Shift tab, in Revit we use Control, but here I'm using the Windows tab. Here I can use Windows Shift tab or Windows tab to go forward and backwards. So it does the same thing with the Control tab. Like, crap, I wanted that 3. Oh, I missed it. You don't have to cycle around 500 times. Control Shift tab will take you backwards.
Brian, you got one last one?
Anybody ever been walking around somebody's office, you go walk by somebody's monitor and like the entire top line is just full and it's like so cram-packed full of tabs? Like, how many views do you really have open? 99.
Close all hidden.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, close all hidden. Yeah.
Windows tile and all you see are a bunch of X's on the screen because
Yeah.
So the other thing that I have, this is a common feature, and I've got like 4 pages more, but this is one of the common ones that I think everybody knows that you can use tab to cycle through things, right? So if I use tab, I can be like, oh, gee, I'm going to tab from one wall because I have a finished wall here and a structural wall here, right? So I can tab and it'll cycle between the different walls or maybe the grid line. But you can also tab and select and it'll give you like a chain of walls. Depending on how those walls are going, depending on which side of the wall you tab on. So if I had like a T connection, it might tab around and go this direction with this interior wall, or it might go tab around the other direction. So depending on which face of the wall you're on when you're tabbing can make a huge difference. The other thing that's great, and we got this because of Revit MEP, let's say you wanted to select walls, but not all the walls, just this wall, this wall, this wall, this wall, this. I'm not going to go through and hit Control 15 times. If I grab a wall, and I'm going to trim these back up here at my corner. If I come back up here and select this wall and I hit the Tab key, after one is selected, watch what it does. It highlights the ones on the left side, or depending on where I pick, it might highlight the ones on the right side. So the Tab key can give you select one, come down to the other one, tab and select, and now I selected the chain between. I don't have to hit Control 15 times to go select those things. I can do that tab chain selection. Oh, that's right, I disallowed join here. I was like, why isn't it going the other way? Forgot I disallowed join, that's why. Yes, I know, I'm joined, just so I can join you. So if I select that wall again, then come over to this wall and hit tab on this side, it's going to dab the walls this direction. If I move my mouse this side, it grabs them to that side. So again, depending on where your mouse is when you're tabbing, gives you a whole bunch of options as well. The other thing is I don't think a lot of people know you can like tab through grips. Like how many times everybody come in here to move their stupid grid head and you always choose the stupid add an elbow, right? Everybody's done that a million times. So I see everybody zooming in, right? And then I see everybody grabbing this, and I see everybody doing this claw method to zoom out. So here's the first tip on that. Drag that grip off the screen. Now I can freely move my mouse without holding it, and I can change those grids and then move my normal index finger to zoom in and out and pan and whatever I want. And it doesn't move until I click my mouse to get it to be activated. But even better than that, you can actually just tab through grips. So if I'm zoomed out here, pay attention to my status bar to see what I'm actually going to be selecting. So if I'm right here, it's going to be, ooh, no, I don't want to add the elbow. Oh, I want to move the model in. Click, drag. I don't have to do the claw zooming thing because I'm trying to zoom in to get that grip. Tons and tons and tons of times I see people doing weird things like zooming all the way in just to select something. The same thing is true for me like when I dimension. Like I dimension, I might want to be getting the face of the wall or the face of the stud, but I don't have to zoom in to see what I'm doing. Just grab the dang center line of the wall or something, grab the other center line of the wall, and then when you're done, just click this grip to move it to something else. I don't want to be dimensioning the countertop. I want the finished face of the wall. Dimension to the center line of the wall, click the grip, and now you're at the face of the wall. So just some of those little tips of thinking about how can I utilize some of these shortcuts to, you know, increase my productivity every day as I'm going through and working. And on that, Matt, no, I didn't realize what time it was. I'll stop.
Let's get my hand.